Welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks. Every week, I have the opportunity to feature different guests from all over the world who are making an impact in their own field to build a world that is just right for all of us, so that we all get to show up in our element, in our humanity, so that we don't appear to be too hard or too soft. Every situation calls for that perfect middle ground in a world that is so highly polarized. We almost have arrived at a juncture in our human society where the extreme polarization is where people want to go. And the folks in the middle, which is technically the majority, have become the silent majority and quietly working to get our world righted back to where it should be. And so thank you for joining week after week on this journey of being that silent majority to quietly do the work so that we build a world that behooves us and we leave it a better place for our children and our grandchildren. Today's conversation is going to be that much more interesting because we are going to be talking about impact. How do we make the right impact? How do we measure and manage it so that the work we are doing to be centered and bring the world for that centeredness to amplify the influence and move the needle for human goodness? I cannot wait for you to meet my guest today. Rachel Simpson, who has become a dear friend. We met through our Chicago Gal community that we are involved in creating an impact in the city of Chicago through Sports Philanthropy Network. And Rachel leads the Chicago chapter, and I have the honor and privilege of collaborating with her and others to truly make a lasting impact in our beautiful city. Rachel, welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henry, for inviting me. I'm so honored to be here. This is special. Thank you.
It is my extreme honor. As we get started, Rachel, can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into this world and profession of creating impact? Because it's not something you grow up wanting to do or go and get a degree for. It's something life brings you towards. Something in your life caused you to make that shift and find that space that truly was meaningful to you. How did that come about?
Good question, Cass. How did I get into impact? Most of my career has been in the nonprofit space. And after years of running the business side of nonprofits, I decided to make a shift. It all starts with my dad. I lost my dad in 2018, and his career was working with people with disabilities. And he was such a role model, and he just set everything out like it should be. It wasn't about him. It was always about helping other people. He was a DE&I expert before that was even a thing. So it was really fun to watch his career. His nonprofit was the first one I worked at. And I was there for 14 years. I went into this job at the age of 20. Started with data entry that he said would take 2 weeks. And 14 years later, I had grown into the vice president of fiscal operations, the development director, and I put systems in place to help them grow. So after I moved to Chicago, I worked for a couple of nonprofits, but ultimately, those are someone else's passion, right? I want to support them, but I don't want to just narrow it down and it be one thing. So during the pandemic, I got the opportunity to think, how could I take what my life experience and turn it into something that would help other people? So I decided that I was going to go into the small and medium-sized companies and help them with their social impact efforts. I honestly believe that there's a lot of resources in corporations that could be put to better use, even the philanthropic side, instead of, we have an idea, let's run with that. Let's set up, what are your goals? What do you care about? Let's really get into the nitty gritty of that and see how we can align that with what you're doing. And I'm pretty sure I made this up. I've met a few people that do this, but we do it in different ways. So it's interesting and fun. and I get to help a lot of people, which is exciting.
Oh, that is so wonderful, because through your dad, you found your calling.
Yes.
And so he was not just the dad. You know what they say, the father is the daughter's first love, right? So he was not only the person you looked up to in every sense of the word, but he became a role model to shape your purpose in life itself. That is so beautiful. And that says a lot about your dad.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. Now, when you work on social impact with private sector organizations and not-for-profits, do you see any difference in the way they approach it? Because on the face of it, every organization, whether it's a government, private sector, or not-for-profit, has a mission that is for social impact. Only difference is the social impact making a profit, or is the profits being pumped back into the social impact? Or is the social impact truly driving socioeconomic development for the entire society, right? Those are the differences, but social impact is at the foundation of everything. And yet, there is sometimes differences in the way the profit motive drives things. So I'm curious to see, do you see a difference?
I do. It's interesting because when companies start researching social impact, like we want to do something good, they start looking at it, and social impact is everything. It is everything that a company does. And a lot of people don't recognize that, but it's governance, it's how you treat your employees, it's transparency, it's everything all in one. So it's interesting to talk to the different organizations. Nonprofits all have a similar goal. They're all vying for the same dollars. So in the corporate world, it's so much easier to work with them to say, look, what do you care about? Let's talk about your core values as a company and then where that can take you. So every company wants something different, and it's interesting. One of my favorite things to do is a complete corporate social responsibility assessment. We've all heard of corporate social responsibility. I just changed the word to social impact because a lot of people don't understand what corporate social responsibility is, or they use the new term ESG. I don't think those are the same thing. So anyway, social impact covers it. So, and there are so many statistics around this. It's just 70% of consumers believe companies should take a stand on social issues. And it's almost like now, if you don't, you're also taking a stand, right?
Yes.
66% of people believe that brands can create real change. 55% are willing to pay more. It just goes on and on and on. So it is different with everyone. And it's so interesting to get in there and say, okay, well, if we do the corporate social responsibility, then we have a baseline. Here's where you are. Where do you want to go? What are your goals? And then how do we reach those goals? And it's just very exciting because it's so different with everyone. Someone wants a volunteer program put into place, or someone else wants, someone to look at their HR manual and say, how am I doing? So it is different with everyone. And it's so interesting. That keeps it interesting, right? Because it's always changing and always evolving.
Absolutely. And as you are talking, what's coming up for me is I myself, if I am not making tea at my own home, I'm a tea drinker. I only buy tea at Starbucks. And people ask me, why do you spend that extra money? I look at them and say, that extra money is keeping a single mother and her children with healthcare and educational reimbursement.
Yes.
That extra couple of dollars is giving my students a alternate income with health insurance while they're going to school full time. So I always have my students look at where you're spending dollars and how are those dollars sustaining your own life. If I don't support those businesses, we will have less students in the classroom, and therefore we will need less professors. Right. So life comes back full circle. Look at the social impact you're creating. What's the point in giving $2 every week to charity when you are taking away the viability of families with every choice we make, right? So this makes for a wonderful finance and public policy conversation for me in the classroom. And it connects right to the heart of what you are doing. So that's the fascinating part for me.
Yes.
When you are talking to clients, if they are in the business of creating social impact for creating healthy environment, but they are manufacturing food that is toxic, right? A lot of times businesses at their core do something completely that flies in the face of what they claim their social impact is. How do you deal with that? Or what advice would you give for companies to be mindful of that? Because there's no point killing somebody and then showing up to help them.
Right, right. A lot of times it's just having the conversation. Sometimes they just don't realize. So just sitting down and saying, okay, let's talk goals. And then you can bring it back to, okay, so this specific piece of what you're doing doesn't really fit into what we're talking about. What are the alternatives that we could do instead that would make a bigger difference? So that's an easy way to get people to start the conversation. And then from there, they start thinking, oh yeah, right. So
So really, they don't think about it. They just keep doing the business the way they've done without. So they're looking at reduced cost and higher profits. And
yes.
then they look at these two as two disjointed activities until you go and remind them.
Right. And when you put the strategy behind what you're doing, it makes everything so much more obvious. What you're doing correctly, what you're not doing, what you could improve, let's put it that way. Um, having all those pieces in place just really make it easy to move forward in what you're trying to do. So a lot of what I do is talk to people about what their values are. And then how do we show that in what you're doing? And a lot of
Mhm.
people don't realize too that when they talk about what's important to them, when a company speaks to what's important to them, let's use your Starbucks example. Starbucks is helping others, and they use that. They don't just keep it to themselves, they talk about it. And they talk about it not only to help Starbucks grow, but to get their cause out there. I use an example, a simple example, when I'm talking to networking groups. When you go to the mall and you're looking for a sweater, and there's two stores in front of you, one of them has a sign in the window that says, "We give 10% back to feed the hungry." Well, I don't even think about that other store. I walk into the one that's helping others. I know I'm going to pay more, but there's some sort of instant trust, right? They're doing good stuff, they're making a statement, and I want to support that. So it does make a big difference when people are willing to stand up for what they believe in and put it into practice.
Absolutely so. And are you helping them connect the increased trust in their brand, increased customer loyalty, as well as therefore resulting profitability? Because they're all related.
Yes, yes, it is. So, what are companies looking for? That's a good question. Stronger brand image and recognition, and this supplies that. Increased customer loyalty and sales. Increased community impact, cost savings, attracting and retaining key employees, increased motivation, easier access to funding,
Mhm.
increased tax deductions, and increased bottom line. And they're a part of something bigger. It becomes more than just their company. It becomes a cause. It becomes part of who they are at the core.
That is beautiful. How do you see yourself change and transform the more you do this? Because you can't do this work and be totally insulated and unimpacted. I want to know, how is this helping you transform and stay connected to the ever evolving world around you?
Yes, good question. One of the things that I'm finding is everyone I talk to is in a good mood. And they're in a good mood because they're changing the world. Um, there's a doom scroller in my house who's forever looking at the news, and it's not good, right? We're all hit with all this really deep stuff that we may or may not want to sit around and think about. So my response to that is, I'm doing what I can to make the world a better place. I don't need to focus on the negative. So I think a lot of it, Cass, is the positivity that I get from the people I help. They're just excited and they want to do this. And they sometimes I get a little ahead of them because I do have some crazy ideas, but We keep talking and then we meet in the middle. So it's it's fun. It's fun. It's a nice change. There's no drama. There's, that you'd find in a normal job. It's just fantastic. And the people I meet are just, I mean, you're a good example of that. Through this work, I got to meet you and we're changing the world together. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. And as you position this just right, what attracted you to Sports Philanthropy Network? And what do you hope to get out of it as we create social impact in the city of Chicago? City of Chicago has everything, and yet we have issues, right? Like every other big city. I always say, of all the cities in the world, I will always choose to live in Chicago because it's got everything and it's very inclusive. At the same time, we have pockets of issues. What do we hope to accomplish there, and how do you see us changing Chicago and creating lasting impact?
Right. Well, I got involved with the Sports Philanthropy Network because I met Roy Kessel, one of the founders, and we started talking and I realized they do a lot of the things that I wanted to do. Right. So being able to come in as the Chicago chapter director and be the face of what we're doing is just fantastic. Um, One of the things that we're doing for the Sports Philanthropy Network is starting to measure their data, which is exciting. So the Sports Philanthropy Network, there are 20 chapters in the US right now, a chapter being a city. So there's Chicago, there's New York, there's Phoenix, there's Nashville, there's 20 of them. So by the end of 2024, they're going to have 40 chapters. 80 different countries have also reached out and want to be involved. So they are growing quickly. And they're a fairly young organization, right? They were founded in not too long ago, and they're growing like mad. But that we're going to put some data around what it is that we're trying to do. So an example of how effective the Sports Philanthropy Network can be. Let's just take one event. We all know the Super Bowl's coming. So in February, there's an event called Tackle Hunger, which led to the Super Bowl of Caring, Super Bowl SOUPER. And it's all about feeding others, feeding those that don't have the means. So this year, Tackle Hunger has a goal of collecting $5 million in both money and in-kind donations. So we're going to be participating. And that's really exciting because what can we do to help reach this goal? So part of the data that we'll just get from that we weren't collecting before is how many people participated from the organizations in this one event? How many dollars were raised? How many in-kind donations did we receive? What organization are we choosing to help? And what is their outreach? Who are their people? Who are they helping? The number of people we were able to help, that's an important number to keep track of. The volunteer hours, community partnerships. There's just so many ways that just having the data will not only help the Sports Philanthropy Network, but it's going to help them with funding. It's going to help them with, it's really going to help them with their stories. Every bit of this boils down to stories, right? Having more data about what you're doing really helps with the stories that you're able to share with the public.
Stories are very, very powerful. Stories move the hearts, and hearts influence the wallet, right? People's time, treasure, and talent comes only when the heart is engaged. So you're right. Stories are the compelling way to do that. And data provides the backbone and structure for the stories. I'm so glad to hear you talk about creating social impact with measurable data so that we can tell the stories about the impact we are creating. So what comes up for me along that line is when we make that impact, how do we make sure that the impact we are making is sustainable and it is allowing people to become self-reliant and have the resiliency and grit to stand on their own, right? We live in a Western Christian society, so I'll borrow a page from Christianity. there's a difference between feeding people and teaching them how to fish, right? So how do we make sure our social impact creation is actually teaching them how to fish so that they have the ability to stand up on their own feet and build their life instead of always waiting for a handout?
Right, right. That's a good point. Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there. Let's see. So how do we teach other people to step up? Well, in companies, most of the time, the younger the generation, the more they don't just want to write a check. They want to get involved. The bigger the company is, the more it doesn't come from the top, it comes from the bottom up. It's the employees' opinions that, like, we should be involved in this, we should be involved in that. So by taking what they're doing and incorporating it into how they operate, that helps them always have that to look back on and to move forward around what they put into place for what they want to do as a company. An example of that is, people will say, "Ooh, let's go volunteer at, let's just use the food bank. Let's go volunteer at the soup kitchen." And everyone's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And then they go, they have a good time, and they're like, "Oh, that was great. Let's do it again." But nobody owns it. But if there's some strategy behind it, then it's going to continue. It's going to be something that they look back on and get the data from, and they use that to move forward. And in the case of who receives the donations, I think the way we do that, it's really important to have the right collaborations and partnerships in place. One person can't do it alone. So one of my favorite things to do is matchmaking. And that sounds funny, but a company with a person that's addressing their cause, and what can they do together to make a bigger difference? So I think putting the right partnerships in place, the right collaborations in place, and the right strategy behind it all, it really helps. And then when someone is the recipient of that, it's not just one person like, "Oh, hey," or a company going, "Oh yeah, we got this for you." It is definitely people working together to make a difference. And then the people that are the recipients see that, and that stays with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I also see that a lot of young people want to volunteer. As you said, the older folks just want to write a check.
Yeah.
And when you write a check, yes, you are giving funds, but there is no personal connection to it.
Right.
Do you see a difference in the way volunteering and writing a check works? And what I have also found is there are more women who volunteer than men.
Yes.
And every not-for-profit I have been a part of, there are very few white men who volunteer. It's always when it's men of color. And I always take my husband along because he's a Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, and I want that male population to be represented, right?
Right.
And we've struggled with that in the various not-for-profits. And the story I always get is, we don't have time because we have so many other opportunities. It's these other people who don't have opportunities need to volunteer to build their presence and make connections. What do you think about that, and how do we make sure everybody gets involved? Because it is, after all, our community, regardless of what we look like.
Right. Well, one of the tricky things about corporations, they can't make people volunteer, right? Like people choose to volunteer. So the key is putting the right things in place so that they want to. What are the incentives to even volunteer, right? Can you do it during work? I mean, that's huge, right? And give 4 hours to go volunteer someplace and pay them while they're doing that. That's an incentive. And then, what they get their name out there. They get, they can talk about that as well. Employees, it helps employees if they're that involved, right? It only helps their careers. So I think there's I come from the South and now I live in the North, and there's a lot of people, I think, that are a lot of white males are like, I don't understand, like we're being left out. But that's not what the message that I want them to get. I want them to see how their involvement can make everything better, right? What, no one's anti-white man. We're just like other people. It's time to share, right? And one of
Mhm,
the things I love is embracing differences between the people, between everyone. It just makes your world better, right?
mhm.
Embracing the differences. So sometimes it's education, sometimes it's incentives, but there's always a reason to expand what you're doing in the world. It helps everyone.
Beautiful. Let me open this up for a conversation with our live audience. But before that, how can our audience get a hold of you, learn more about the work you do, or get engaged with one of the charities you're working with?
Sure. So I have a web page. My company is Gear Up Consulting, and the web page is timetogearup.com. And I'm also on all the platforms except for Twitter. So Threads is a new one, which is exciting. Learning how to use that one. But yeah,
Thank
so
you.
I'm out there, and I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my primary source of getting the information out. Um, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm going to open this up to our audience. Bridget, go ahead. I know you are ready to ask your question.
I'm really interested because my background is advertising and marketing.
Yeah.
And apart from, obviously it's the socially right thing to do, I also know from personal experience that it isn't always for me, it's completely win-win, everything that you're talking about. But it isn't that easy to always convince the people you're sat in front of in an organization. And I wonder, is it like 50-50? Some are completely committed to wanting to do it, or is there a degree of, well, it's what we should do, and there's an element of cynicism you have to nurse them through?
Yeah, it's a combination, really. Not everyone is always on board to make change. I mean, what is social impact? It's change. Who wants to make change? Like nobody, right? Like, oh, do we need to change? So, but what happens if you do change? What happens if you don't? And sometimes just looking at those different things gets people on board. I was in a conversation a couple of weeks ago with someone, and he said, "Well, we don't talk about how we help other people." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because I don't want to look like we're bragging. Like that's not who we are." I'm like, well, to me, it's not really so much about bragging. It's about, as a consumer, would I want to be involved with your company because of what you're doing? Like that's how I make a lot of my decisions, right? So I hear you though, and there's a lot of, greenwashing where, people just talk about stuff to look good. But unless they have that strategy in place and unless everyone's on the same page, it doesn't work, right? So
Yeah,
it really
because
takes some
that's
buy-in.
yes, because what I heard you saying in when you were describing what you were doing, a lot of what you were describing was how I would sell an ad campaign. Like you were giving them some absolutely fantastic ideas for their company. And like, but as I say, it's all win-win, isn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, I talk to clients about Patagonia, like there was, and Tom's shoes, like all those, they're actually companies founded on the on that whole belief system, and it shouldn't be tick box at all, and I find it frustrating, so you must find it frustrating
Yeah,
as
for
well.
sure. And there's so many different kinds of companies now, right? They're not just nonprofits and for-profits. There are social enterprises who exist to do the
Exactly.
good and share it like Patagonia. So that is a new and exciting development, right? That companies are being founded on doing good stuff for the community, which, like, as a marketing person, that only helps the company, right? Who doesn't want to help that?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just like Dr. Cass said, if all you have to do is go and buy a really nice jacket or a cup of coffee, then that that's an easy thing to pat yourself on the back about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
I
Thank you.
absolutely love what you're doing and how you're talking about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Always love the fact that you stay from the UK to attend this, regardless of the time zone difference. So thank you so much,
My
Bridget, for
pleasure.
being a part of this community. Robin.
Okay, you know that I would absolutely love this I am loving this conversation. This is right up in my wheelhouse. I just asked, which hopefully won't be too fast of a question, but what was the spark or what is the catalyst for you that got you interested in this work? I mean, what is it that drives you personally to get into this work and to pursue this work, which is
Well,
to be challenging?
that's a good question. I think a lot of it comes from personal experience. My life has not been perfect, right? There are problems. Everyone has problems. Problems come up. Um, I I could get personal with it, but knowing that I can help make a difference where someone could have made a difference in my life really helps me move forward and help other people. Because I look back and I see ways. I was a young mother, and there are so many ways that people could have been helpful with that instead of how I perceived the judgment of, oh, you're a young mom, you don't know what you're doing. Instead of, hey, welcome, let's, well, so and taking the values that I care about, which is mental health, it's there are addiction issues, there are, there's so much in the family that it's just great to be able to help another mom through that situation. So it's my personal experience put into play, I think.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Robin. And it's truly heartwarming to see that you are taking from your personal experience and then projecting it in a way that you're showing up for others, right? And you have chosen not to be the way other people treated you, but you're being the solution you needed when you needed something.
Yeah.
And that's truly where change happens. And
Is.
thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for leading Sports Philanthropy Chicago community. And I cannot wait to continue working with you and partnering with you to amplify our mission and truly make Chicago an even better city.
Yes.
And to all our audience out there, as we bring in 2024, get out of your comfort zone, take an introspective journey, and think about how you can make an impact. Life is not just getting up, making money, eating, sleeping, buying the things you want. That is a completely transactional life cycle that doesn't leave a footprint when we leave this world. What if we just took a moment and looked for ways to create a lasting impact so that when we leave, we have built something that is going to outlive us. And because of the fact that we were here, there has been an impact created. So think about that, make that a part of your 2024 mission. Go out there and transform lives and help us get the world just right in the spirit of Goldilocks.